I'm Adah Fitzgerald. It is so good to see you. I am the owner of Main Street Books, and it is my great honor tonight, in partnership with Charlotte Writers Club, to host this evening's celebration of the life and final book of poems by Tony Abbott. Tonight's introduction will be given by Anne Campanella, who is also an author and poet. Her books, Motherhood Lost and Found, Celiac Mom, What Flies Away, and Beach Poems, have won many awards, and we've been delighted in selling them at Main Street Books and hosting her for many events. Anne Campanella, welcome.
Thank you so much, Adah. So the first thing I want to do is thank Adah and Main Street Books for hosting this mega Zoom event. We are just so thrilled to be partnering as Charlotte Writers Club North with Main Street Books and Adah. This is just a very special evening. I am a former student of Tony Abbott's from Davidson College. And if you heard Jacqueline Bussey's wonderful eulogy, you'll know that she also, or I like her, was a student who got to know Tony my spring term senior year. And like Jacqueline, I was bereft at the thought of leaving Tony behind when I graduated. But several years later, fortuitously, my husband and I moved back to this area. And for a good decade, I took every poetry class that Tony gave. And we became very close friends over the years. He always asked about my horses. He asked about my mother, who had Alzheimer's. And he was so excited about the birth of my daughter because he knew I'd had a series of miscarriages. One of my tenderest memories of Tony is when he came over to see me and Sydney, my daughter, who was a baby at the time. She happened to have a stomach bug, and I had been giving her Pedialyte. And as soon as Tony knocked on the door and came in, Sydney started spewing orange Pedialyte all over the living room, on the couch, on Tony's sweater. And he just immediately went down to the floor, started cleaning up, and I was kind of trying to juggle the baby and take care of him. And he just said, no, Anne, you take care of Sydney, I'll get this. And as I'm sure all of you know, that is just the kind of person and just wonderful man that Tony was. Back in August of 2020, Tony contacted me to let me know that he had a new poetry collection being published by Kevin Watson at Press 53. Tony could not wait for me to read it. He couldn't wait to just celebrate it. In fact, he said, Joseph Bethanti said, it's my best book. And he asked if I would arrange a reading through Main Street Books, which of course I was so happy to do. And I wish that he could be here in person to feel the love that so many of us have for him. But I trust that he's here with us in spirit. We have several readers today who will be sharing either a favorite poem or one from Tony's new book, Dark Side of North. These readers represent just a small sample of the students, colleagues, and friends who adored Tony. I really wish we could have invited everyone who had a deep connection with Tony to read. But as you can imagine, we would have been here we'd be here for weeks, maybe months, who knows. So please forgive me for not being able to include everybody who I know was important to Tony. We do have several wonderful readers, however, and in the interest of time, I have asked each of them to introduce him or herself briefly and to give us their connection with Tony so that we'll understand that. And I just want to thank you all so much for being here and say what a joy it is to celebrate the life and writing of this very special man. Our first reader will be Steve Abbott and his wife, Katie.
Hello, everyone. We are so glad to be here. And we're so glad to be part of this. And happy birthday, Pop. Today's my father's birthday, which is not an accident. We settled on this day for that reason. My name is Steve, as Ann said, and I am the second of Tony and Susan's sons.
My name is Katie Smith Abbott, and I am Steve's wife and the very fortunate daughter-in-law of Tony and Susan Abbott.
Yeah, there are so many people to thank, and we keep being overwhelmed by the support for Dad. But I do want to single out Ann tonight. Ann, thank you so much. Ann got in touch with me right after Dad passed away back in October, and said she would shepherd this event through, and she's done an amazing job, and she's done it with such fondness and care for my father. So thank you very much, Ann. I'm imagining that we're all sitting in a cozy, quaint bookstore on Main Street, and I would just be so happy to be together and be with you all and trade stories about Dad. His poetry for me is such a personal thing. He didn't actually start writing poetry until sort of midway through his career. I think I'm late in high school or early in college, and I read his first book, which was actually not a book. It was pages that he had copied and stapled together and was passing around. And it was a explosion of revelations about who my father was. It was full of wisdom and his sense of humor and his faith and stories and his life. And poetry became this form of communication after that, this way that we worked through issues, the way he communicated, the way he spoke from the heart, which wasn't always easy for him. His poetry, I think, for a lot of people is a way to communicate, which is why he kept doing it. I think his center, he was definitely a teacher at heart, for sure. But I think when he added poetry to that, it was a way of really, really connecting with people in rich ways. I think his own sense of expectations about his writing were always on the modest level. I think he tried to keep his own stature as a poet in perspective. But we had a fun moment a year ago at Christmas. Well, you go ahead, you tell him.
When many Abbotts were gathered around our dining room table here in Vermont, and our fabulous niece, Clara, taught us a new game called Top 5, where you have to name for the person at your right what their top 5 of something will be, and the rest of the people have to guess it and write it down on little lists, and then see how our lists compare to what the person actually wrote down for themselves. And the person who comes closest to matching the person who you're writing about, you're the big winner. So Clara, understandably, for her grandfather, picked Tony's top 5 poems.
Yeah.
And we all got furiously to work.
Billy Collins, Mary Oliver.
Plumbing the depths of our memories of what we could come up with, how smart we could appear with our knowledge of poetry. And we revealed our lists, one more profound and antique than the last.
And on Dad's list were
two of Tony's top 5 poems
were by Tony
Abbott. And we just thought that tonight we would read one poem, the top poem, in fact, from Tony's top 5.
And we like it too.
We do.
You want to go?
Genesis. The swinging Lord, that master maker of cool chords, shifted in his empty heaven and said, I need me some music. So the sky was full of music, and he declared that it was good.
And then the equally androgynous Lord said to herself, I need some light to fill the fragrant fingers of the night. So the water shone with light, and she declared that it was good.
And when the light and the music played together, the stars wept for the beauty of it. And the swinging, singing Lord said, I need me some people to praise this thing that I have made.
The Lord thought long and long about what sort of people might be the purest praisers, what sort of people might truly see the light.
And he made man with his cunning brain, and he made the zebras and the elk and the swift running antelope for man to wonder at.
And she made woman with her imagining mind and her long, limber dancing legs and her eyes that saw the color and the light.
And when the man and woman had been crafted, the Lord declared that it was good.
Then the man heard the light in the woman's eyes.
And the woman saw the music in the man's mind, and the music was the silky manes of violins.
And the light was like the laughter of clarinets and the glitter of guitars. And the man and the woman moved to the measure of the music and swayed to the gold and amber brilliance of the light.
And they knew that the sound was neither his nor hers, nor like anything that ever was before. And the Lord saw what they had made, and behold, it was very good.
My name is Jacqueline Bussey, and I too was a student of Tony's at Davidson, and I graduated in the class of 1991. One of the greatest honors of my life, honestly, was the fact that Tony had asked that I speak at his memorial service. And I did that, and I was amazed and humbled that my words have now become the foreword to Tony's book of poems, Dark Side of the North, that we're celebrating here tonight. So I've been asked to share a brief excerpt from the foreword. And in that foreword, I mentioned one of the poems. So then I will also be reading that poem that I mentioned, which is called A Fluctress. So here's the excerpt from the foreword. When I was a 19-year-old student at Davidson, I played the clarinet in an orchestra concert that Tony attended. I remember looking up at the packed house in DCPC and catching sight of Tony's face. His eyes twinkled, his hair stood completely on end from having removed his winter hat hastily, and his face was filled with completely unmasked delight at our music. I mean, the genuine kind of delight that you rarely ever see on an adult's face. True story. I went home and wrote this sentence in my journal. I think Dr. Abbott has the secret to living, and I want to figure out what it is. Years later, I believe I did. Tony was a fluctress. Tony wrote a splendid poem called A Fluctress that he let me publish back in 2016 in my own book, Outlaw Christian. A fluctress is a word that his friend's 4-year-old daughter made up. It means a person who is able to see the things 4-year-olds see. And the truth is, even in his 80s, Tony Abbott, like all 4-year-olds, was still wedded to wonder. Learn again to take one step at a time toward the wonder, he once wrote in the poem called Seekers. Tony saw things. I mean, really marveled at things that the rest of us grown-ups barely even notice anymore. Like the song of a scarlet tanager, the smell of a rhododendron, the sight of a girl in a yellow raincoat. Tony's favorite poet, Mary Oliver, once declared that paying attention is a form of prayer. Tony Abbott prayed aloud through his poems. Poetry was how Tony praised this marvelous and mutilated world. Mary Oliver once wrote, "When it's over, I want to say all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms." We all know Tony succeeded at this. He was married to amazement. His poems are the wedding ring of that lifelong union. Read them and become a fluctress. Take the world into your arms. Tony would want you to. So the poem that I'm going to be reading, of course, is the poem A Fluctress. Today my daughter made up a word. Effluctress, she says, are things that can be seen only by 4-year-olds. Scott Owens. 4-year-olds, darling. Yes, I agree completely. It's only the only I have a problem with. Poet, sweetheart, and lovers especially, can see all sorts of things. So give us a break, my dear, because we love what you can see, and you'd love what we can see too. The other day, I was walking home from church, and all of a sudden I said out loud, even the streets are holy. That's right, out loud. And I looked down, and there in the cracks between the sections of the sidewalk, I could see I was right. God was there in the pieces of the sidewalk. He told me so. He did, my love. Not in so many words, but you know how a effluctress works. Things don't just come in words. And then in the trees over the street, there was Mary, the Mother of God, in her blue dress with gold embroidered hem and sleeves. She had very dark hair and smiled at me as if to say, it's all right, don't worry. She stayed with me for days, kind of floating along in the trees all over town, just smiling and saying to me, don't worry, let it be. I know that's not original, but I couldn't resist it. And if she's not a effluctress, I don't know what is. I love your rainbow bird outside the window very much. But this is Mary, the Mother of God, in her blue dress and gold embroidered hem and sleeves. I'm sure of that. I know, I'm not 4 anymore, but I sure want to be a effluctress. And I just wanted to know, well, how am I doing?
Good evening, everyone. My name's Joseph Bethanti. I'm a friend of Tony's, and I'm a student of his too, even though I never took a class with him, because to be around Tony was to pay attention. You know, I had prepared remarks for tonight, but now they feel kind of stiff and academic. So I'm just going to tell you what I think of when I think of Tony Abbott. It's one of the very first people I met when I came to North Carolina, and my not then wife, Joan, in 1976. We were Vista volunteers working in the prison system just down the road from Davidson. And I should say this, I'll interrupt myself. I'm giving myself permission to stumble here and not read a script. Tony Abbott will always be Davidson for me. He was already an accomplished writer. He had jet black hair. He never stopped smiling. He was athletic. He was kind. He had a lot of the things that I someday wanted. I wanted to be a writer. I looked up to him. And I might be imagining all of this because a lot of this is gone now, but he lived in this remarkable white house on Main Street. I think it's where the public library is now. You know, he had 3 gorgeous little boys that are apparently grown up now. But I have them in that light always. They had a golden retriever named Ko and his lovely wife Susan. He taught at Davidson College, and he took me under his wing. You know, a complete stranger. So I always think of Tony that way, boyish, able to reinvent himself again and again with this blazing social conscience before we even had the language for social conscience. And he was a writer of such incredible stature, but he was so humble. He had this deep spirituality. You know, he had this light that just emanated from at all times. And so for me, Tony just will never vanish. Every time I drive down Main Street, You know, I see that house animated. I see those little boys. You know, I see that dog come bounding out. And I always asked them about the kids. And, you know, they were 12 and then they were 15. And then they were, I think the last time I saw Tony, it was in Lexington, North Carolina in 2019. I walked him to his car. Anytime I saw him, I went to him. I wanted to be around him. I wanted to breathe the same ether. And I think I could swear he said he had a son in his 50s. So it was quite incredible. He's quite a family man. You know, he bragged in all the best ways about his kids and his grandchildren and I would ask him how old he was, and he would say, "I'm 79, I'm 81, I'm 82," and I was astonished every single time he told me, because I still have him memorialized as that forever young Tony. And I think if you knew him, and obviously you knew him and loved him the way Joan and I will always love him, he will always be that sprite, that boy, just waiting for the next poem to come along, you know, the next bird to light on his shoulder. So I'm going to read the title poem of his simply remarkable new collection, Dark Side of North, which is a very, very clairvoyant poem too. The dark side of North, or is it the north side of dark, looms strangely over the upturned world. Hurricanes without rain, tornadoes without wind, yet the red buds blossom obscenely. Times Square deserted except for 2 Japanese tourists in masks, restaurants, bars, theaters, libraries, all dark. Trucks with bodies in the streets outside the hospitals. Red buds laugh in our shocked faces. In Florida, college students frolic on the beach. Primaries postponed. Churches, schools learning to Zoom. Conferences canceled. Bath tissue shelves empty, but why? Daffodils multiply like yellow square roots. So stop, whoever you are, and look around you. Perhaps I will be here, perhaps not. I am, they say, among the most vulnerable. This is my remembrance. I cannot touch you except with broken words. Azaleas pink and white quiver in the breeze. We are on the dark side of North, the north side of dark. Tens of thousands, one doctor says. At the Bronx Zoo, even a tiger has tested positive for the virus. Wipe the railings, wipe the doorknobs, wash your hands. In Washington, the cherry blossoms smile to the empty pass. Perhaps you are reading this 10 years from now, and I say to you, we are like whales stranded on the beach. We can sing from our balconies, but we cannot touch. We die in tens, then hundreds, then thousands. The crosses on the dogwood blossoms tremble in terror. We wonder what there will be when we walk once more on the open streets. What price the touch of a friend, a grandchild? On Palm Sunday, the Pope spoke alone to an empty St. Peter's Square. No cardinals, the fingers of love beckoned through the greening leaves.
Hello, I'm Janice Fuller. I'm Professor Emerita at Catawba College. I met Tony back in the early 90s at a time when Ann Campanella would also have been with Tony. I took as many courses, as many workshops as I possibly could. I became known, as we all did at that time, of being Tony's poets. And I still feel that I'm one of Tony's poets. That time was a turning point in my writing life. Tony believed that it was important to accept yourself and to keep wonder in the world and to know that whatever you needed to say, sometimes it was dark and harsh, that it was okay to say it. He used to call himself the velvet, forgot what he called himself. a velvet hammer, that he would speak the truth, and then he would say it, as he said, speak the truth in love. And so he allowed me to be the poet that I was, writing about some harsh elements of my life, and made me feel affirmed and safe. And it was very important to me. In the years since then, he's been a generous mentor. If I needed a letter written about giving me my credentials to go to a workshop or to do some kind of residency, he would always write it. He always stood by me. He was a colleague. He taught some with me at Catawba, and he was a dear, dear friend. I haven't had a friend any dearer than Tony. He influenced my own workshop so much that students started teasing me for using, as Tony Abbott says so often during class. I was in Wales teaching with Minna Elvin, and she said, "You keep saying, as Tony Abbott says, who is this Tony Abbott?" And I said, "Tony Abbott is a poetry guru, a gentleman, a kind man, and my friend, and the best poet that I know." I'm going to read Lynn's poem from section 1 of Dark Side of North. In it, he revisits what Yeats calls one of his old heart mysteries. That's from Yeats's poem, Circus Animals' Desertion. And it's the fact that one of the hard elements of his life, he kept returning to it, trying to figure out what he had learned about it since he wrote his first poem about Lynn. Lynn's poem. All morning I have thought of you, the long vowels like a stretch of years since you slipped into that strange darkness at the top of the stairs, slipped away and hovered in the bridges of my mind like ropes over a dark water. And now, finally, I know I had it wrong, or at least had it sideways, missing the sweetheart at the center. It was never about the losing, only the having. And I didn't know that until my angel told me. Write about the luck, she said. Write about the luck. I loved you even before you were born. I wanted you so much. When the doctor said, "It's a girl," with some edge of dismay in his gravel voice, I could have hit him. I wanted you, and I got you. You were perfect. That's all I have to say, except this. You did it all before you left. That's what I see now. You took your brother up the stairs and played for hours without us hearing you. Taught him love and grace and quietness, which he carries to this day. And something the rest of us did not. I don't know. Forget things. Years muddy the memory. I had been away all summer almost. Something it was that led me round the back. And there you were alone in the sandbox, playing by yourself, quietly, peacefully, of course. I called across the lawn, and you looked up, and then you came to me. "Dad," you said, and again, "Dad." You hooked your legs around my waist, your arms around my neck, carried you in the house. On Easter Sunday, the day before you died, you held the neighbor's baby in your arms. Later, your grandfather held you. She would never let me hold her before, he said. She only wanted Dad. I understood that for 4 years you gave yourself to me, and then you left like an April snow. All about the luck, my angel said. So here it is. You came perfect, you left perfect. The love poem? Yes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Vivek Griffith, and I am zooming in from Austin, Texas, and it's a tremendous, tremendous honor to be here today and to be invited to be part of this celebration of Tony. I lived in Charlotte in my early and mid 20s, and during that time, I became one of Tony's students in the classes that he would teach in the community, driving down from Davidson and spending his evenings around a table with poets in the community. And at that time, I was young and I was intimidated and I was desperate to be a writer. And Tony created such a sense of welcome in those spaces, such a spirit of generosity. And one of the things that was striking then, that is still striking to me now, is that he brought to those classes his own poems, and we gave him feedback on his poems along with getting feedback on our own, which really, I think, helped me and many of us probably believed that we had a voice and we had something to offer and that we were part of that community and we were poets. Ultimately, I moved away from Charlotte, and when I applied to graduate school to study poetry, Tony wrote my letters of recommendation. And today I am a writer and I am a professor of poetry, and I do almost all of my work out in community settings, working with adults who show up to these classes because they want something for their lives that didn't seem accessible to them before. And I know that the teacher that I am and the teacher that I aspire to be is modeled on the teacher that Tony was for me and for so many of us in this space. I'm going to read tonight his poem, a poem from The Girl in the Yellow Raincoat, titled Leavings. And I chose this poem because in the early fall, I installed a poetry box at the corner of my property that where I can post a poem every week and people can read it as they walk by or take a copy of it. And that poetry box actually went up the week that Tony died. And when I heard that he died, the first poem was in there, which was a Mary Oliver poem, and who I now know is his favorite poet. And so the second poem that went in was a poem by Tony Abbott, who nurtured my own love of poetry as a young person, and who I think sort of lives inside me in terms of wanting to share poetry with the world. So this is Leavings. It's subtitled For My Father. Outside my window, a gnarled old oak leans precariously on his elbow, snarling at his successors wrapped smugly in their canvas diapers and waiting to be lowered into the hard winter earth. The other arm is gone, the socket painted closed with that preservative we use to keep the old from rotting. Knots bulge from his side like tumors. Still, I think I like him better than all those thin-skinned babies packed lightly in their little holes. He's not so predictable. In the spring, he'll flower strangely and dance his own configurations in the wind. Bless you, older brother. May my leavings be so rich.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Mayer. I first met Tony when I worked at Davidson College, and later I took classes from him at Queens College and some classes in Davidson and became his friend. I just have been tremendously inspired by his writing through the years. I'd like to read a poem from the second section of his new book. It's called Jamie's Prayer, and it starts with an epigraph. Dear Lord, bring me through darkness into light. Bring me through pain into peace. Bring me through death into life. Be with me wherever I go and with everyone I love. In Christ's name I ask it, amen. For Frederick Buechner, its author. When I read the poem to myself out loud alone in my room, I felt the tears come, and I knew for the first time in many months that I would be all right, that I would find myself again, that the dry ghost of these withering months would not win after all. Later at the meeting, I read the prayer out loud to the assembled council and said that it was my favorite prayer, that I had typed it out to give to anyone who might want to put it on their bedside table as Jamie had. I read it slowly with some emotion, then sat down. At the end of the meeting, no one came up to me. No one wanted the prayer. In my room, I took the copies I had made and cut them into tiny pieces, hundreds of tiny pieces. Then, with both hands full, I hurled the pieces to the ceiling and watched as they came swirling down, covering my mending heart with their tiny letters.
I'm Don Carroll, and I'm honored to be with you tonight. I was a student at Davidson when Tony came to Davidson College, and there was no other new professor arrival during my 4 years that caused as much excitement as Tony's coming. I think it was in part his pristine Ivy League credentials, but more than that, it was this expectation about who he was as a person and a teacher. And the college's excitement about Tony's coming has indeed been rewarded many times over. I didn't have Tony as a student, but fast forward to the early 1980s, and I moved back to Davidson and landed in a little book club that was starting and in which Tony also was a member. And our book club read a great variety of books, but over the years, I found that my appreciation, particularly of novels we read and the occasional poetry book, really was animated by Tony's experience. And so of all the sharing in the book club that went on, it was with Tony that I often was able to share afterwards by conversation or by email about something that was particularly meaningful to one of us. You can't publish a book of poetry without allowing yourself to be deeply vulnerable. And poetry, of course, is not a literal version of a writer's experience. It's a work of imagination. And that process, the poet seeks to bring the reader into a world of the writer's own experience. And this is an intimate experience.
Hey, Mimi.
And I came to appreciate that, I came to appreciate that one of Tony's greatest pleasures in life was sharing in the delight of a well-turned phrase or a striking metaphor or the exacting architecture of a good narrative, and especially the turn in poetry that will take your breath away. Tony delighted in sharing these deeply felt experiences. In fact, it was in the sharing of them that they were most illuminated. And so the poem I would like to read tonight from Dark Side of North in section 3 is one in which Tony invites you, the reader, the listener, into the poem. And it's a reflection of these desires to share with another person the intimacy of a beautiful moment or beautiful music. The title of the poem is Sitting Alone at the Post Office, Listening to Beethoven's Fifth. Quite simply, it was not over when I arrived, and I could not bear to let it finish without me. There is this thing about music, that we are graced once or twice in our lives to hear the actual notes. Think of Mozart in the film, hearing the pure music, rolling the billiard balls across the table, the whole symphony in his head, every note, and how he loses it when someone opens the door and speaks. In the car now, alone at the post office, I hear the final movement of the fifth and imagine someone, you perhaps, sitting in the other seat, listening to the notes with me, and how the moment would be doubled, tripled, transformed into its own platonic forms, the essence of musicness, if you like. That pure note which can never be repeated, only felt in the heart for years, to come in other post offices I might go, to mail a letter to someone, perhaps you. Still imagining how my very soul might have been shaken from its dull, lethargic roots, had you been there beside me in the car at the post office, when the final movement of the fifth played that day.
Hi, I'm Dee Dee Mitchell. And I first met Tony, like many others, when I took workshops with him at Queens College. Back then, I was starting to get more serious about writing and writing poetry, but I was really shy and uncertain about everything. And he was the right teacher at the right time. He was so kind and so gentle, And like others have said, Vivek said he brought his own poems and asked for our comments on them, which just struck me too, his humility and his egalitarianism. The other thing that struck me about Tony, and I saw it again at his last reading, and I was so glad I could be there, is the joy that he took in his own poems, which I got a real kick out of the first story that his son and daughter-in-law told. That just sounded like him so much. The poem that I'm going to read is called Taking Care. And it's one of my favorites of his. It's from The Girl in the Yellow Raincoat. And it became an important poem to me, so important that I shared a phrase of it with a friend of mine. And we often close our correspondences to each other, whether it's text or email, with one of the words from this poem. So here it is. Taking care. Outside, it is raining. My brown bicycle turns slowly browner. Columns of water march unimpeded through the Fiat's open window onto the cracked vinyl seat. Things cry out for care, leaves to be raked, gutters cleared, wires spliced, hinges oiled. In the bathroom, on den shelves down the dark hall, plants grown hoarsely for spray. Mice in corners of closets chuckle with delight. I am idle, amused by the animation of things. I slouch in the broken chair, its springs popping, and think of you. Take care, we say. Meaning what? Drive slowly? No smoking, drinking? Careful, meaning slow. Careful meaning don't let go. Careful meaning hold tight to the reins. Conscience and brains and the tidy calculations of the CPA, Economics 101A. We know better, you and I, caretakers that we are. Take care, we say, meaning Kara, dear, meaning full of preciousness, meaning we are gifts to one another, like those marble-veined old women in print dresses, those moppers of floors you see stealing near dawn from buildings in Lower Broadway, stockings rolled below their knees, necks crimped stiff from twisted work. On checkered floors, they keep the blacks black and the whites white. We keep the light in one another's eyes with apples, jokes, and charms. Go well, friend. May you have scarves on snowy afternoons and water under docks in June. Mount slowly, breathe easy, and ride.
We'll take a short intermission, and during our intermission, I'm going to show a video. After our intermission, Ann Wicker will read.
Late afternoon. I lie in the long grass and wait for words. The still white clouds mock me. Then, unexpectedly, the sound of music. I sit up. When I was 9 years old, my family dissolved. The first chapter of my novel, Leaving Maggie Hope, tells the story of how my mother shot my stepfather, and she didn't do any damage particularly, but it was the end of the marriage. My stepfather went to New York, he was a lawyer, and my mother went to the hospital. And what do you do with a 9-year-old boy? And the answer is, you send him to boarding school. And I loved it because I felt safe and secure there. And the second year at boarding school, I earned a weekend. So I decided I wanted to spend a weekend with my mother, and I took the train from my school to New York City, got out of the train at Grand Central Station, and my mother wasn't there. And I would say that was the single most traumatic event of my childhood. There's a line in one of my poems: he put his tears in his back pocket with his used handkerchief. So I put my tears in my back pocket with my used handkerchief, and I decided to be strong, to work hard, to be successful in school, and not to get too emotionally involved with my family. I think what I wanted to do was not to repeat what my mother did. I wanted to be a good husband, a good father, have a family. I got married, we had children, and when we moved to Davidson, I mean, it was like Davidson was the perfect family place. The strings carry our love over the hills to the sea. The horns offer it to the sky, and the strings set it aloft. It is done. They have gone home, and who and what they are we carry within ourselves. It was in the Easter of 1967. We'd been here 3 years, and very, very, very unexpectedly, with no warning whatsoever, our daughter died just before her 4th birthday. I had never written a poem to speak of before that, but I had put my tears away in my back pocket with my used handkerchief, and I literally was not able to express feelings and emotions. And poetry is the language of the soul. Poetry is the language of feelings and emotions. And so I began very slowly to write poetry to express my sense of loss, my sense of grief, my sense of love. The girl in the yellow raincoat waits on the sidewalk outside my window. The flower in her hair is wet. She stands very still, her eyes focused upward on some object I cannot see. She does not move, but she smiles slightly. Perhaps she plays the cello, and she is humming Bartok silently, making the bow ripple with her tongue against her teeth. Or maybe she's waiting for a bus to take her to her lover. Or she has read a letter from Paris or Istanbul, and she smells coffee and chestnuts steam roasted. And she hears in the narrow streets the cries of vendors under the aged curves of bridges. Perhaps she's just a girl, standing in the rain in the early morning while the street shines. It is nothing, you argue. Then why do I weep? And why are there splinters in my palms? And why do I stand here long, long after she is gone? My soul is a teacher. I mean, there's no question that what I wanted to do with my life is be a teacher. When I went to boarding school, the people I loved the most were my English teachers. And at Kent School, my English, and at Princeton and Harvard, I loved my teachers because they were my male models. This week, I'm teaching three classes, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, and one on Thursday. And I love it. And I love being with the student I have mostly now, what they call mature students, older students, and I love it. It's wonderful. I mean, if I couldn't be a teacher, then I'd want to be the center fielder for the New York Yankees.
Our next reader is Ann Wicker.
Unmute and okay.
You got it.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ann Wicker, and Tony was one of my mentors at Davidson College, where I was part of the somewhat infamous class of 1977. And also, I was very fortunate to be able to get to know Susan and David and Steve and Andy when the whole Abbott family went with a group of us to Oxford in the summer of 1976 for the program that Davidson had at Oxford at that time. I will forever be grateful for Tony's friendship and his support, both during my college years and after my college years as I became a journalist, a writer, and an editor. I miss him. I'm going to read a short poem from his new book, The White Dress. At Emily Dickinson's house, Amherst. Going up the stairs in your house, going up the stairs and turning, going up the stairs and seeing the white dress there in the front window, and turning then into your room and seeing the small bed and the bureau and a table and chair, the room white, the furnishings spare. And then suddenly you appear yourself, your red hair. That's what seizes me. The red hair and the smile and the impish, roguish sense of humor and the white dress. You are wearing the white dress. And smiling as if to say, all these years you have got me wrong. You have got me wrong, you stupid, plotting pedants. Stop bowing and think of me now with my incandescent smile and my rueful laugh at life's absurdities. Here I am in my white dress at the top of the stairs. That's as far as I will go.
Next, we have a recorded reading from Lisa Zirkle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Zirkle. It was my great honor to have been Tony's student. It's as a teacher that I'll remember him most, but it is his example as a lifelong student of poetry that is in part the reason why I'm not with you today. I'm engaged in a virtual residency for my MFA at Warren Wilson. The last time I saw Tony in person, I told him I'd been accepted to the program, and you won't be surprised to learn he was so excited and happy for me. Thank you for allowing me to give voice to his words today. Here's his poem, Something to be Done. Something to be done. To have started something at once, the day before yesterday, when the doctor said non-small cell lung cancer, stage 3A, 3 much better than 4, and A than B, all a matter of statistics. You do what they tell you and take your chances. You stay happy, eager to fight, even as the weight goes down and the color drains and the pants drag loose about the waist and the shoulders of the jacket slide off down the arms. Listen, who cares? What matters is the surge of the soul down the steps to the water. What matters is the color of the sky as the sun sinks southwestern into the blue lake, and it is still possible for something to be done. Better than watching TV in the living room, hooked up to the spiraling green cord of oxygen. What matters is what can be done for the 4s and the 5s.
Our next reader is Suzanne.
Hi.
Hi.
Can everybody see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I first met Tony probably about 25 years ago when my friend Ann Campanella invited me to attend one of his classes with her. And I met some of you fine folks at that same time. And Later, Tony would help Ann and Susan Lawson and myself with a student poetry contest that we ran for a while. And, you know, eventually we just became friends, and he became a friend and a counselor to me. He was always ready to give me good advice about my work. He always asked about my family, and not in just that casual way, but in that sincerely interested way. And I just am struck by the fact that no matter the context of being in Tony's presence, whether it was just a chance meeting at a football game or in a workshop, or it just having a coffee and conversation, he was always teaching. And I was always learning when I was with Tony. So I'm going to read a poem from his latest collection, These New Days. These new days are like snow in November, beautiful and white and troubling. The left foot leaves a small and crooked track. The right drags slightly over uneven ground, each uncertain step, perhaps the last. What do I know now? Less, it seems, than ever before. The wisdom of age is nonsense, treachery, and forgetfulness. Who cares? The next generation and the next come hammering at the door. It is their turn. They are hungry. They cry for entrance. What can I say? Go take your dirty words elsewhere? Surely not. Come to my table, and I will limp to you with sharp pencils. While you write, I will look out the window and watch the snow, white and troubling.
Hi, I'm Andy. I'm Andy Abbott. I'm Tony's son. I wanted to tell a little story. When I was in high school, growing up in Davidson, I went to North Mecklenburg High School, which was wonderful. It was a pretty conservative place at the time. And they didn't teach The Catcher in the Rye at school. And one night at dinner, my father expressed concern about that because he loved the book. And of course, he told me what A Catcher in the Rye was, and the story of Holden Caulfield. And he would stand at the edge of the cliff. He wanted to catch the children before they fell off the cliff in the rye field, and loved to preserve innocence, and help his sister and things like that. And the next day, I came up to my room, and a copy of the book was on my bed, and that was a signal. And I read it, and I loved it. And in fact, I finished reading it. I remember calling my brother afterward and having a big talk about it. And then I became an English teacher, and I taught it for years and years. And then when this A Small Thing Like a Breath came out in the 90s, there was a poem in it called Of Catchers, which he dedicated to me, and I'll read. And then all of the good poets here have read and stopped, but I'm not a poet, I'm a teacher. So after I read it, I'll say something about it. Of Catchers. In the rye and elsewhere, I can only say it is a matter of timing. These kids, you know, running through the deep field, not seeing the cliff, and you there, noble you, with your big hands grabbing one. Great. But the next one tumbles, screeching down below into the whatever. The field is too damn big. The kids are everywhere, you see. Or the girl, the trapeze artist, swinging her long legs out once, twice, she flips, and then grasping the rod behind her knees, back and forth, she rocks and launches out into the sweet nest of your waiting hands. But you're swinging back, reaching now for air itself, watching her fingers one last time, stretching for you as she falls. Catching its bruised thumbs and busted bones in every joint, and a cold smack in the soul every time you lose one. So drop it, son, so to speak, now. I love that poem, and I read it over and over, and in a lot of ways, I always thought it as an admonition about being a catcher. If you are a catcher, you're going to get a lot of pain, and it's going to hurt a lot. And over time, it struck me as a strange thing for him to write, because he was such a catcher. And as a teacher, he constantly had people coming to him and tell him their secrets, and he endured a lot of that. And it was a hard smack in the soul every time he lost one. And then what I realized over time as a teacher is it's not really a warning against being a catcher, because I think the poem itself is an act of catching. He was always trying to catch people and trying to caution people from being hurt, but of course knowing that was always going to be impossible. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Campanella again. And I just wanted to say one of the things that I admired most about Tony and his poetry is that he had this ability to capture certain times and periods of life, and he just was able to really frame them and kind of give us as readers kind of a handrail to walk through these different periods of life. And I remember meeting with Tony one of the last times. He had cancer, and I remember him saying, I think I've written my last book. And this was before he had written Dark Side of North. And I was so sad, because I thought, oh my goodness, I really want to hear and learn from Tony as he goes through this next period. And I said to him, you might have one more book in you. And he just kind of smiled, like, you know, the student is trying to tell the teacher something, and he wasn't sure he wanted to hear that. But I am so grateful, and I know all of us are so grateful that he did work on this last book, and that I really feel like it was a gift that he left to all of us. And just knowing that he passed away before it came out, I thought that's really just like Tony. He would want to leave us with something that is so meaningful. And again, it's like a handrail helping each of us walk through the last stages of our lives. And I just want to say thank you to Tony. And I have the honor of reading the last poem in his last collection, and it is called The Last. The last walk, he thinks. The last stroll down the wooded path with the dog sniffing in the cool morning air. The last knock on the red door. the last subway ride, New York, London, Paris, the ungovernable steps, the violins at the Louvre, the last sigh under the stairs. Better not to know, tomorrow or 10 years, better to receive each morning as a wrapped gift. The last glimpse of the crescent moon at midnight, the last swim in the smooth lake, the last flash of the sun as it sinks into the sea, the last wave reaching high and sliding back, the last poem, the last linking of lines, nothing more to be said anyway, the last silence between words, the last of the lasts that have already been, the last kiss, the last touch, the last image of arms at midnight, the last breath before the last. I just want to thank everybody so much for being a part of this program tonight. The readers were wonderful, and it was just such a gift to have so many people here with us. I know it was impossible to see everyone's faces, but it was, I could definitely sense your presence, and I know everyone could. And we just thank you for coming together. I did want to say, if anybody is interested in more of our Charlotte Writers Club North programs, Tony was a member and a great supporter of Charlotte Writers Club North. If you'd like to know more about Charlotte Writers Club or Charlotte Writers Club North, go to the website, Charlotte Writers Club. There is a tab for Charlotte Writers Club North, and it will lead you to a calendar of our events. And I wanted to mention that there will be another community event celebrating Tony's life on January 27th at 7 p.m. This event is sponsored by Davidson College, Davidson Learns, DCPC, the Davidson Community Players, and Learning in Retirement at the Pines. John Griffith is organizing this event, and there will be a link to join the webinar, and I'm sure you can get that link from any of these organizations. Thank you again, and I will turn the mic over to Adah.
Thanks, Anne, so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks to Anne, thanks to the Abbott family, thanks to all of the readers who joined us tonight to really show us how Tony just cast this wide net and pulled us all together. As I say to a lot of folks, I joined this sort of book community when I purchased Main Street Books in 2015, and I'm often sort of the last person to meet all of these great movers and shakers in the writing community in Davidson and the Charlotte area. But Tony very graciously welcomed me. He always had copies of his books in his trunk, should we be running low at the bookstore, when he popped in to say hi. And one of the sort of most striking, incredible moments in the first year of ownership, somebody, and I don't know who it is, a man walked in to the store, pulled me aside, and recited from memory one of Tony's poems to me in the store, because he just really felt so moved and wanted to spread the beauty of them. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a wonderful night.